I'm 24 now, and I thought I'd finally buried the nightmare that was my teenage years, until last week, when my stepmother knocked on my door like she hadn't been the reason I almost ended up homeless at 19. The story really starts when I was 17 and my dad passed away. It was sudden, heart attack while he was jogging, no warning, no time to prepare. Just like that, I was an orphan. My mom died when I was little, and since I was 9, it had been just me and Dad, until he remarried Sharon. Sharon moved into our lives like a storm. She was polished, controlled, and always had a glass of wine in her hand after 6 p.m. sharp. She didn't like mess, noise, or emotional displays, which meant I was constantly on eggshells. Dad tried to smooth things over, always said she just needed time to adjust. But Sharon never did. If anything, she adjusted me out of the picture. When he died, the will left everything to me. The house, his savings, even the vintage car he'd spent 5 years restoring. But there was a catch. I couldn't access most of it until I turned 25, except the house, which I could keep or sell once I was 18. Sharon was supposed to be my guardian until then, and she made it very clear, every single day, that I was living in her house. A few months before my 18th birthday, she started pressuring me. Said it would be simpler if I signed the house over to her name. She framed it as a legal technicality, just something to make bills easier to manage until I turned 25. I didn't trust her, not really, but I was scared, lost, and still grieving. And she had a lawyer draw it all up. I signed it. And that was the beginning of the real betrayal. By the time my 18th birthday rolled around, Sharon had already moved her new boyfriend into what used to be my dad's home. A week after I signed the house over, she told me I should start thinking about college housing because she and Greg needed space to build their life together. I was stunned. Just months before, she'd said we were family, said she wanted to help me succeed. Now she was kicking me out like I was a tenant overstaying my welcome. I didn't have anywhere to go. I hadn't even picked a college yet, and I sure as hell didn't have money saved, because the inheritance was locked until I was 25. I asked if I could at least stay through the end of the school year. She said no. Said I was technically an adult now, and it was time to stand on my own 2 feet. The very next morning, I woke up to find my things boxed and stacked by the door. I'll never forget the look on her face, completely blank, not an ounce of guilt. I spent the next few months couch hopping between friends. I finally got into a community college and managed to scrape by with part-time jobs. Every month, Sharon texted me something snide, "Hope you're budgeting well," or being out in the real world builds character. It took 3 years of saving, borrowing, and hustling, but I made it. When I was 22, I used part of the trust to buy a small house in a quiet neighborhood 2 hours away. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. The house represented freedom, stability, and the first time in years I felt safe. Then last week, Sharon showed up at my door. With a suitcase. I didn't even recognize her at first. She looked different, tired, older. The makeup and heels were gone, replaced by flip-flops and a stained hoodie. She smiled like we were old friends catching up, like she hadn't ripped away the only piece of home I had left when I was barely old enough to vote. I didn't say a word, just stared at her, stunned. She looked past me into the hallway, nodded like she already felt comfortable, and asked if she could stay for a few days. No explanation. No apology. Just walked right up with her little roller bag like she owned the place. It took a few seconds to find my voice. I asked her why she was here, and she shrugged like it was obvious. Said Greg had left her, the house was gone with foreclosure, and she had no one else. I should have felt something. Sympathy maybe. But all I felt was cold. I told her I didn't think that was a good idea. Her expression shifted instantly. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Oh honey, don't be ridiculous. I practically raised you. You owe me more than a few nights on the couch." That's when I felt it, this boiling heat rising in my chest. She thought she was entitled. Like all the pain, all the years of struggle she'd put me through didn't matter because now she was the one in need. She kept talking, walking inside like I hadn't said anything. And then she said it. "This place was bought with your father's money. If anything, I have just as much right to it as you do." That sentence hit me like a punch to the throat. Just as much right? I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag her right back out the front door and slam it in her face. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, because hearing her say that out loud made something very clear. I hadn't been imagining it all those years. She really did believe she was entitled to everything my dad left behind. Including me. She parked herself on my couch, kicked off her shoes, and started scrolling through her phone like she had all the time in the world. Meanwhile, I stood in the doorway, heart pounding, still processing the fact that the woman who forced me out of my own home was now sitting in the middle of mine. She started commenting on things, how cute the place was, how it must have been easy with all that inheritance money. I couldn't believe the audacity. No mention of the hell she put me through. No sign that she even remembered kicking me out with nothing but a duffel bag and a $50 gift card from a neighbor. Then she looked up at me and asked what the Wi-Fi password was. Like that was the most pressing thing in the world. That's when I snapped. I told her she had 5 minutes to get out or I was calling the police. Her whole face changed, like I'd just slapped her. She jumped up, stormed over, and hissed, "You think you're better than me now, don't you? Living in this little house like a big shot?" I didn't respond. Just pulled out my phone and started dialing. She grabbed her bag and bolted out the door, but before she left, she turned around and said, "You'll regret this. You don't know who you're messing with." And then she was gone. Or so I thought. I thought that would be the end of it. That she'd leave in a cloud of entitlement and never come back. I was wrong. The next morning, my phone started blowing up, calls, texts, voicemails. All from unknown numbers. Turns out she'd posted about me on Facebook. A long, dramatic rant about how her ungrateful stepson, yes, she actually called me that, had stolen her rightful home, and now she was homeless, all alone, and just asking for a little kindness. I wasn't tagged in the post, but a few old family friends saw it and reached out, confused. One even asked if I could maybe forgive and forget, because family is family. I nearly threw my phone through a window. Forgive and forget? Where was that advice when I was couch hopping and praying my part-time job could stretch enough to afford a sandwich and a tank of gas? Where was Sharon's family values when she handed me a trash bag and told me I had 2 hours to clear out? I didn't respond to any of the messages. I just stayed off social media for a while. But then, a few days later, I came home to find a piece of paper taped to my front door. It was a letter. A legal one. From a lawyer. Apparently, Sharon was trying to sue me. She was claiming she had a verbal agreement with my father that she'd have lifelong access to any property acquired with his assets. In other words, she was trying to claim partial ownership of my house. I stood on my porch for a long time, just staring at that letter. And then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so incredibly insane that laughing was all I could do. The letter wasn't some vague threat, it was a formal notice. Her lawyer was demanding a meeting to discuss equitable arrangements, and they were throwing around phrases like rightful occupancy and undue hardship. It was surreal. I half expected a camera crew to pop out and tell me I was on some twisted reality show. But this was real. Sharon was really trying to take me to court. For my house. The one she kicked me out of years ago. The one I bought after clawing my way back from nothing. I took the letter to a lawyer the next day. Explained everything, from the inheritance to the forced eviction to her sudden reappearance. He read through the papers, asked a few questions, then leaned back in his chair and said, "She doesn't have a leg to stand on. But that doesn't mean she won't make things difficult." And he was right. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated fast. Sharon didn't just stop at legal threats. She started showing up in my neighborhood. I'd spot her car parked across the street, engine running, just sitting there for hours. Sometimes, when I left for work, she'd be outside, pretending to walk her dog, even though she's never owned one in her life. She even came to my job once. Walked right into the front lobby, smiled like she belonged there, and asked the receptionist to page me. Thankfully, my boss intercepted her and had security escort her out. But the damage was done. People were starting to ask questions. Whispers were circulating. And I could feel my grip on the peaceful life I'd built starting to crack. Sharon wasn't just trying to steal a house. She was trying to drag me back into the nightmare I'd spent years escaping. I started sleeping with the lights on again. Every little sound outside made me jump. I knew she couldn't legally come into the house, but that didn't stop the paranoia. Sharon wasn't stupid, she was manipulative, calculating, and worst of all, she played the victim flawlessly. The court date got set, small claims, for now, but it felt like a looming shadow over everything I did. My lawyer was calm, confident, said we had nothing to worry about, but I couldn't relax. Not with the way Sharon was acting. Then, just when I thought she couldn't get any lower, I got a call from a local shelter. They asked if I could confirm my willingness to provide temporary housing for Sharon until the court process was resolved. I was speechless. Apparently, she had told them I was her stepson, that she was temporarily displaced because I had unexpectedly locked her out of her rightful residence. She gave them my name, my address, even claimed she had documentation proving I had agreed to let her stay. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about the house anymore. This was war. She wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to wear me down. Make me so miserable and scared and exhausted that I'd just give in and let her have what she wanted. It was never about fairness, it was about control. Just like it had always been. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room, lights on, doors locked, phone in my hand just in case I had to call the cops. I kept thinking back to when I was 18, alone on that same sidewalk with a trash bag in my hand, and how helpless I felt. That night, I swore I'd never let anyone have that kind of power over me again. But now here she was, back in my life, dragging up the same fear, the same helplessness. So the next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my dad's old lawyer. The one who helped set up the trust. I had no idea if he even remembered me, but when I mentioned my name and what was happening, there was a pause. Then he said, "You might want to come in. I have something you should see." I drove to his office that afternoon, stomach in knots. He pulled out a thick file with my dad's name on it and flipped to a page near the back. Then he handed it to me. It was an addendum to the will, dated a few months before Dad died. In it, he made one thing painfully clear: Sharon was not to inherit anything. Not the house. Not the trust. Not a dime. He wrote, in his own words, that he feared certain parties might try to manipulate his son or the estate. He wanted everything locked down. But here's the kicker: he also included a clause that revoked any verbal agreements unless they were co-signed by his attorney. My dad had tried to protect me. Sharon never knew about it. And now? Now I had proof. I left that office shaking. Not from fear, but adrenaline. Finally, after all these years of second-guessing myself, I had something solid. Proof that my dad knew what kind of person Sharon really was. That he'd seen through her act, even before I did. I handed the document to my current lawyer, who lit up like he'd just won the lottery. He said it changed everything. Not only did it kill any credibility Sharon's case might have had, it opened the door to filing a counterclaim. We could go after her for harassment, for defamation, for emotional distress, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of justice. But I wasn't ready to strike just yet. Instead, I made one final move. I had my lawyer draft a cease and desist letter, backed by the addendum, and sent it directly to Sharon and her attorney. 3 days later, I got another knock at my door. But it wasn't Sharon this time. It was a process server. She was suing me again, this time for emotional damages, claiming I caused her mental anguish by abandoning her during a time of need. I almost laughed. She wasn't backing down. And I was done playing defense. Court day came like a thunderstorm, heavy, loud, and impossible to ignore. I walked into that courtroom not as a scared kid anymore, but as someone who had survived the worst version of her and came out standing. Sharon showed up in a beige pantsuit, looking worn down but smug, like she still believed she'd win. Her lawyer barely made eye contact with me. I don't think he even believed her case anymore. Mine walked in carrying the folder with my dad's addendum like it was the sword of truth. The hearing was short. Sharon's side tried to paint her as a grieving widow who had been unjustly cast aside. They claimed I had manipulated the estate, that I refused to honor spoken promises. When the judge asked for evidence of these promises, they produced none. Just her word. Then we submitted my father's addendum. The room shifted. Her lawyer's expression dropped. Sharon tried to protest, said my dad would have never written that, but the judge shut her down instantly. The handwriting was verified. The clause was legal. And just like that, her case crumbled. The judge didn't just dismiss the lawsuit. He scolded Sharon, told her that her actions bordered on malicious intent, and that I had every right to file a counterclaim. My lawyer asked if I wanted to proceed. I looked over at Sharon, her face pale, her hands trembling, and for a split second, I saw the fear I used to feel. The same helplessness. And I said no. Because I didn't need revenge. I already had what she could never take from me, peace. As I walked out of the courthouse, my phone buzzed. A message from a realtor. I'd put in an inquiry about a second property 2 days before. Something small. Maybe for renting. Maybe for starting something new. Because now I was free.